Welcome to the Startup Grind.
House at midnight is you could get it at half rate, so it's only $200 an hour to be able to have an edit suite for just $200 an hour. It was amazing because it was normally $400. But if you went in at midnight to 6 a.m. and you could actually edit your own video. And so the idea that we could make a tool that would let you do that and you could own it and have it all the time in your hands to do whatever you wanted. And when you weren't using it, it just sat there because it was yours. Which is amazing.
I think that's granted because that's in every computer now.
Right. Editing equipment was like surgical operating rooms. They didn't just sit there until you personally wanted some surgery. They didn't wait for you. But it was kind of an alien thing. So we shipped this, and we ended up outselling every video production switcher, digital video effects device combined, all 50 years of television history in 1 year.
Wow.
Sold everything. So we went from people laughing at us to
You hear Pound Gorilla.
well, I don't know if we were here in Pound Gorilla, but we became pretty successful. Rolling Stone called us the bad boys of video. We won a Primetime Emmy in 1994 for changing the industry. We made a lot of mistakes. We bought a jet, Italian sports cars, and did all the things that guys in their 20s with way too much money, way too fast, who worked way too long alone in a room building something. All of the mistakes that you could possibly make in that scenario, I think I've made.
So you actually won, and I was looking through your notes, you actually won 2 Emmys, so that was just the Emmy for products?
Yeah, that was the Emmy for the video toaster, and then in 2012, I won my second Emmy. I got to go to Hollywood and walk the red carpet again, and that was for a product at Adobe that basically it's the TV Anywhere concept that you can authenticate because you could pay DirecTV or Comcast or phone company for access to CNN and ESPN, all of those things as part of your basic cable package. Well, technically, they can't just stream that to you for free on the internet because they've already sold those rights collectively for $50 billion to the broadcaster who you're paying your cable bill to. And so the problem was everybody was authenticating one off. And so I was actually having dinner with the CTO of CNN one night in 2009. And one of my favorite questions to ask, this is after a day of business meetings, just a social thing, and I said, so what is the one problem that keeps you awake at night, that's looming on the horizon for you and people like you in your business that's going to screw everything up in 5 years? And he said, well, because, so then if you want to watch their property, CNN or TNT, Cartoon Network, one of their properties, and you're a Comcast customer, so you go to Comcast site, you want to stream it, and he says, well, you have to authenticate at Cartoon Network, and you can't go to Cartoon Network because we can't stream it to you. And so they send you to Comcast, and you have to type in your password. But now you want to get content from another company. Let's say you want to go to MTV on your computer. You have to go and do another login on a Viacom property, because that's not the same as a Turner property, or a Disney property. Everyone would have their own. So they were all these balkanized islands, and everybody would have to authenticate for every channel that you wanted to watch. And he said that is going to never work. It's going to stop video on the internet from us being able to stream stuff. And so I started asking, well, how would you fix that? And so we started actually drawing out on a napkin, like, well, the technical fix to solve that problem isn't that hard, really. And this was in San Francisco, so I was driving home late that night. I just spent a lot of time thinking about it because I was driving home. And so I sent them an email the next day, hey, we should, I thought more about that. But they were really excited, so CNN sent one of their VPs out here to Sacramento. We hung out at my house and played video games and designed what became the first TV Anywhere system in my back room. And what was cool is Mike Weiss, that guy who helped design it with me, he was playing at my house and he would take the Emmy, that I had from 1994, and he's like, wow, it's really cool. Everybody does a little acceptance speech, and they hold it.
I should ask you to bring your Emmy here for that.
Yeah, it's fun. The wings are sharp, very sharp. So, but, he was doing that. I said, well, you'll probably, this works. What's on the whiteboard in my office works. You'll probably have one of those of your own. And 2.5 years later, I reminded him of that in Hollywood as they were taking our picture, getting his stuff. So it was a cool, very cool thing. So we won for basically solving that problem, which was the first time Adobe had done a cloud-based business. And so one of the big challenges was, of course, hiding the project at Adobe and colluding with CNN, our lead customer, and getting them to call their competitors and get their competitors sold on what we were doing, because they realized if they didn't get enough people to do it, Adobe would have no incentive. So our number one salespeople were actually the executives at Turner and CNN, so getting Viacom and calling up their competition at Disney. You have to talk to these guys, and you want to do what they're talking about, because we don't all do it. You know, basically they were giving the message that if we don't hang together on this, we will all hang separately. And so they, you know, we were able to do it, put together a standard, put together an industry coalition, and get the technical specification implemented, and did a trial in about 4 months, very quickly, and it worked with one network and one cable company, and based on that, then we extended it and got everybody on board. It was an interesting process. They're going into DirecTV in LA, and their CTO walks in the room and says, "I know what you guys are here to talk about. Don't even know why you're here. We will never do this." Before he had sat down at the table, he was just like, "We will never do this, so you can just save your time and leave." And they became one of our biggest supporters. But ultimately, there was a lot of trepidation and concern about putting in a new standard like that and how would it work, how the economics work. There was a lot of money changing hands between people that didn't trust each other, but had to work together, these big corporations. And so for me, what was fascinating about that was that dynamic of, can we fix this problem? And it's so invisible, there is no UI. None of you know that you use it, but you've all used it. Most of you use it every day. You know, we've authenticated billions of streams, the Olympics, and the Final Four, but it all happens in the background. You don't, and it just works, because the design was, if this works, nobody will have to do anything, right? It will just fix the problem.
Yeah, I feel like it's not so much a technology, you said the technology was easy, it's more of a coordination and trust.
Well, I didn't have to write anything, and so it's easy for me to say that the technology is easy. You know, there were challenges, but the architecture itself wasn't, you know, pretty simple. You draw it out on a whiteboard, you can kind of understand, okay, customer here, authentication rights here,
Right.
How do we validate that, send a token, and let them know this person's okay to stream this channel. Pretty simple in terms of the block diagram. Execution, you know, particularly between a bunch of different parties, and getting that put together and making sure that we could actually pay for it to be a profitable business for Adobe was kind of challenging.
Was the Adobe banner, was that more of a hindrance, or do you think it was kind of what, you know, Adobe's a recognized name?
I mean, there are a lot of things that I do where I think doing it under the Adobe banner is actually a downside, which is why I often do stuff for Adobe, not under Adobe's name. You know, so people out there today in the world engaging with what they think is a startup, and it's really my group at Adobe running something through a startup's name, because we don't want the Adobe halo to affect the tests that we're doing when we're doing rapid lean tests and things like that. But in this case, you know, first of all, just, you know, if we weren't Adobe, we wouldn't be having dinner with the CTO of CNN to ask that question to start with. So there's access that gets you, which is great. Our salespeople call on everybody in the industries that we work in. The other thing was having the resources and wherewithal was very useful, but this is sort of the paradox of working in a large company. It's almost the inverse problem set of a startup, because this actually, Adobe's the first big company. My largest company was 250 people before we sold it. So, you know, Adobe is 14,000 people around the world, 60 locations. And so it's, I know them all on a first name basis. But the challenge is that you have an enormous amount of resources inside a large organization, but you also have systems and process in order to allocate those resources most efficiently, because fundamentally that is what a public corporation is. It's a system for the optimization and allocation of resources. And so you're trying to generate a better return on those resources than they could get elsewhere. And so that system gets in the way of being able to tap those resources. And so it's interesting because people, you know, when I started out, like, hey, so we're at Adobe now, so I have this cool idea, I need like $30 million, you know, we could go do it. Why can't I just get the $30 million? Finally, you know, we have the resources, but you have to do the same kind of justification. It has to make sense in the same way as raising venture capital. It has to make sense to the organization. The good news is Adobe's successful enough that we have the money. The thing is really figuring out, are we allocating it in the right ways? And you're trying to target a certain risk profile so that you're returning a margin to Wall Street. And this is the downside of a public company, that there's these expectations mapped forward in time. And it gets a lot harder to do dramatic transitions like what we did with Creative Cloud in the last 3 years, where we went from a box software business all the way to a full online service. And we had to tell Wall Street, well, things are going to look shaky. It's going to go like this for a little bit, because people buying $2,000 full suite packages of software are going to stop, and they're going to start giving us $50 a month or $20 a month or whatever it is. And so our revenue is going to go, but the value over time, the lifetime value of that customer giving us that money every month. And by the way, we think it will expand the market dramatically, because a lot of people couldn't reach in their pocket and pay $700 for Photoshop or $2,000 for the whole suite, but they need it for 6 months. They can pay $20 a month for those 6 months and have access to it. And it turns out that's true. So our sales actually went up when we did this.
That's a common problem, I think. You know, if you look at, I mean, there's so many examples of it in the last 20 years. You know, like you look at Blockbuster, and they had this, you know, rent it at the store model, and it gets quickly surpassed by, you know, the Redbox and on demand. But they just couldn't break away from their bread and butter to make that change. But by not breaking away from the bread and butter, they're kind of like sunk.
Right, so Clayton Christensen calls it the innovator's dilemma. He wrote 4 books about it, and I think he captured really well that you have this problem in any large successful business, that it becomes really good at doing what it's successful at. And that's awesome for optimizing value until the world changes, and the darn world keeps changing at an ever faster rate. And so the number of companies in the largest 500 companies, you know, the half-life until half of the largest 500 companies turned over used to be about 50 years, and now 7 years. Yeah. And so, you know, if you're a big company, you know, you need to be scared all the time and start looking at, well, our current businesses will change, and how will we change with them? Because if you end up in that situation where the margin and everything changes about your business fundamentally, you actually can't make that change, which is why doing the Creative Cloud transition is so incredibly risky and really difficult to do for Adobe. But we were able to actually navigate that successfully, but it was really hard and really scary as we went through it. You know, just knowing that we're going to come out the other side of this and it's really going to work. But there were a lot of skeptics on the way, and since we've done that transition, our stock has more than tripled in value. So it ended up paying off, because now people are seeing that we've unlocked an enormous amount of value and more useful to more customers. It gives us more ways to grow more dynamically. Now we've added another service on top of that. We acquired the 3rd largest stock photo company in the world in January. And so we did an $800 million acquisition now. And so that's another online service. So we're starting to stack those things on, which was part of, you know, the diabolical plan. If we can make this transition, we can be a lot more useful in more ways to more customers. And that's what I spend most of my time working on now.
And if you don't do it, there's going to be a 3-person startup that's going to eat their lunch in apparently 7 years.
Right, yeah. And, you know, 3 guys in a garage is actually one of the things that you have to be worried about in a large organization.
So when you guys, so actually, when I was going through your background, I'm like, wow, you are like a guru at product development, creating amazing products. Like, can you tell me, like, you have a philosophy or an approach when you're developing a product?
I think fundamentally you have to be interested in the product. So to me, it's sort of the first step in being successful at doing product is figuring out your motivation. Why do you want to do this? And actually thinking that through really carefully, because I've done it with not clear motivation and ended up failing massively. Those times when my motivation has been really aligned, like I know what I want, I know why I want it, And I mean sort of personally, where I want to go in life, what I want to be doing, what will make me happy, what I'm interested in. When I align those things with what I'm doing every day, I tend to be successful. When there's misalignment, because I think, well, this will be really successful, that's a hot area, and I don't listen to the fact that I'm not actually that excited about that. You know, I sort of let when it's a really hot area, it's on the cover of Wired, must be big, you know, Internet of Things or whatever. Like, but if I'm not that excited about it, you know, it may be a hot area, but for someone else, not for me. And so I think every entrepreneur, every product person that makes product, every inventor needs to get in touch with that alignment. If you can build that core alignment between your own passions and interests and the marketplace and what customers are interested in, so it's finding that alignment. So a lot of times we talk about product market fit. I think first you have to start with entrepreneur customer fit way before you get to product market fit. And but if you could do that and get that alignment, I think you could be very successful. So for me, it all starts in motivation and really understanding what I want to do and why I want to do it. And then the neat thing about that is that when you emerge, a lot of times, even if your product isn't successful, you can be successful because you've done what you wanted to do. And obviously what we do is play a high-risk game. You know, we're like the base jumpers of business, right? Except we don't even strap on the parachute, we just hold it and jump off. We'll put it on the way down, you know.
No on the way down.
Right. And so we have to get used to taking those risks. And I'm totally fine with taking risks, but the risks that I want to take are actually the ones where if I look back and say, you know, later, if this doesn't work out, I'll say I'm happy I made this choice. Based on what I knew at the time, I made the right choice. Because if I make enough of those correct, even though sometimes they're not work, but if I keep running that pattern, ultimately I'll be successful. It's when I look back and go, God, what were you thinking? You know, like, how did you get duped into this thing that now you see you shouldn't have been doing, you weren't aligned with, didn't really make you happy, it all blew up. And so for me, I just want to look back on the failures and be what I call happy failures. Like, I would do that failure again. I learned a lot. And just as likely if the coin had come up the other way, that one would have worked. Like, a lot of times there's just stuff that's out of our control, market timing and other things that, you know, you can't control that. But generally, like, I get questions sometimes from mainstream media, and they ask about, you know, well, serial entrepreneur, you're these wild-eyed risk takers, you know, that like to just take crazy risks. And every serial entrepreneur I know, a lot, people that do this a lot hate taking risk and try to avoid taking risk as much as possible. So the game that we play is risk elimination. Risk reduction is what you need to get good at. And so it's about trying to figure out how you get a peek at the next card on the table before you have to place your next bet. And you know, that to me is actually the secret to being a successful entrepreneur is learning how to reduce those risks.
All right. Well, since we're talking about entrepreneur, let's talk. The last company you founded for Adobe was Serious Magic. Actually, first off, and I kind of know the answer. Where did you get the name Serious Magic?
I kind of wanted to capture the feeling of creation of software, and the process that we do is really magical. And the relationship that we have with customers in terms of particularly making creative tools, making customers more powerful. And I felt like in my previous startup, I had not really appreciated what we were doing and approached it in the right core motivation. And so Serious Magic was all about actually backing up and doing it right. It's very zen about getting everything aligned right at the front. And it was amazing how well it worked, how incredibly efficient it was. But it was a software boutique where we pretty much just did software we were interested in for customers that we liked. That was, you know, it wasn't because we thought there was a huge market or anything else, but those products, and 5 new products, each the first in a new category, each won multiple product of the year awards from national magazines. So 5 tries, 5 hits, the power of having a great team and complete alignment and very clear on what your mission is.
The reason I'm bringing it up is a friend of yours, Marcus Allen, asked me to ask you that question. But he basically said it was because you were an amateur magician on the side or something.
Yeah, I used to be. And Mark used to be a clown, which is worse.
Oh, he still is.
Yeah.
He still is.
Yeah, no, a lot of people think that is why, but it was really about the core of, I think when you do it right, there's a vibe to it. And in my second startup, I felt like I lost the core of that vibe.
So how did it come out? How did you and your co-founders come together and say, let's start this company?
Well, everyone's different, like every time you
Right.
do it. It's usually a confluence of availability and opportunity and seeing something that you get excited about and knowing the people that you know could do that super, super well. So for me, I think one of the keys to doing a startup is you have to find your core team of people. And one of the things that I find interesting is there are people that they come together in a startup weekend or startup grind event or some one of these cool events, which are awesome. But a lot of times they emerge and it's like, well, we all met, and so we're going to do this company together. And then I have to ask them, so well, if it's a really good idea, now that the weekend is over and you won the event and you guys are all excited, you're going to keep going, what are the odds that one of the 50 best people in the world for doing exactly what you need to do to make this company successful was the one that you met at that event? Because if it's really the right idea, if it's really the Google, if it's really the Facebook, can you afford to fuck it up by, well, he was in the group, he was there, so, and he's really nice. Maybe not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I mean, that is how you destroy your company in the beginning. And, I've made that mistake. This has to be deadly serious business. You're going to take years of your life into doing this, and you need to find, and look, the guy you may not think is the right person may be awesome for another startup, right? So you're actually depriving them of years of their life by involving them in what you're doing if they're not right. And so it's actually bad for both groups. And so you need to make sure you have that alignment with your team and that you have the right people. And when I say the right people, I mean extraordinarily, uniquely talented people. These are people, I probably know less than 20 people, but I would say you could build a startup around this person, right? Like, I look at them and this engineer, their skills, and usually other engineers, when they talk about them and they're just like, it's not just good, he's spooky, right? like they're freaked out, like they're that good, because a really great engineer isn't like twice as good as another engineer, they could be 500 times better, right? It's like exponential. Like one guy that worked at Series Magic, we had all top-notch engineers, and my head of engineering had said, well, doing this feature has never been done before, programming a GPU to do something that was never created to do, will take us a minimum of 3 to 4 months. And I said, I bet Benoit could do it. And Benoit is this sort of short French guy, hand rolls his cigarettes. And I went and said, Benoit, I'll bet you can't do this. What is it? What is it? Well, it's this GPU thing, and they said it's going to take like 3 or 4 months. No, they're stupid. It's not. And Benoit basically be an asshole, but he looked at it and he's like, I think about it. I don't know. It's probably not a good idea. Maybe you don't want to do this. It's not good. I'll think about it. So that was Friday. Walks in Monday, throws the CD on my desk. It is done. I smoke. Goes outside and smokes a cigarette. And that is, a guy you can build a startup around. Right? There's not a lot of them. And so you need that kind of top gun talent. And a great idea and a great market and the market fit. A lot of things have to come together. But fundamentally, the biggest mistakes that I see entrepreneurs make is they get the wrong market. It's not necessarily the wrong product, because you pretty much always have the wrong product. But if you're in the right market, you can fix that, right? And before you die. So just assume you will have the wrong product. But if you can nail the right market and the right timing to that market, I've built several things that could have been multi-billion-dollar companies had they happened 7 years later or 7 years earlier, right? Like the timing, like comedy, entrepreneurship is timing. And the next thing is your co-founders, right? So if you nail those two things, which is amazing to me because people emerge from their first weekend thinking they have those down. And I spend, it's funny because I meet people sometimes these things, and I met a guy who's got probably 20 maybe, and he's like, yeah, I've done 14 startups already. I'm like, really? Cool. Tell me about it. And he's talking about, he's like spent 2 weeks on these things. And I'm just like, he's like, well, so how many have you done? Well, I've done 3. Yeah, wow, you're pretty old to have just done 3.
It must really suck.
Yeah, it must really suck, but all of mine had, dozens of employees and tens of millions of dollars in revenue and really ship things. So I don't call it a startup until you have revenue and you ship something. You're just playing around with ideas until you get to that point. So, I think more correct to say, I've played around with 14 ideas because I play around with ideas today all the time in my garage. And sometimes I'll fund people to do something, do a little experiment, play with it for 6 or 7 months, and then look at it and go, that's really cool, but not good enough. Nah, pass, right? I've looked, people say, how many ideas do you go through? I have notebooks, keep pretty organized. And near as I can tell, it's hard to be exact, but it's about roughly 210 ideas that I seriously explore for one that I would do. So I don't just mean thought of it, I mean like stopped, research, spent money on 210 to research, spent days to get to one that I would really pursue as a company. So I kind of go the other way. A lot of people say, just get in motion, grab some people, do it. It's like, you probably have time for 6 startups in your life, maybe. Because once you've taken money from other people, you have to try until it's dead, right? That's the moral obligation that you have. And so that will take 3 or 4 years of your life to do that. And so you need to be careful. Because I've got entrepreneurs, hey, I have investors ready to give me money. And I just think, I'm sorry. Because now you have to make a choice. Because they're now forcing your hand because they want you to take the money. And you need the money to grow. But I try to counsel them that this is the moment you have to decide whether or not you want to walk away. Because it's the last moment you can walk away with no obligations, without sawing off a limb to get away. You're about to put your arm into the bear trap, and you cannot get away. You're about to kiss 3 to 4 years of hard time into this thing, committed. Are you sure? How sure are you? And I think you should be really sure. So I'm super in favor of exploring things really fast and exploring a lot of them, and doing it fairly deep. And you keep the ones that you keep exploring. But before I'd ever really get into anything, I spent at least a year thinking about it and investigating before I actually would tell anybody else, I'm going to do this idea. That, to me, to get to that level, it has survived a lot of gates that it had to leap over. Because there are a lot of ideas that are almost good enough. A lot of concepts and markets and customers that are almost good enough. But you don't want to make one of, you only have 6 magic beans, 6 startups you could really go after in your life. Where are you going to put those?
Exceptional, but what do you personally look for if you're looking at a co-founder?
So generally, this is sort of the rule, not just for co-founders, I think it applies to everybody, same things apply to all of the people early on in your company. So all the good people already work at Adobe, or Google, or Apple, so straight A's in college, went to an Ivy League school, aced all their tests, super reliable, super consistent, interviewed great, totally have all their shit together in every way, and they want a job, they already work somewhere else. So those people aren't available to you. So the secret of being an entrepreneur is you don't get the A players. You have to build an Olympic winning team out of C players. You do have a lot of other variables you can control. You can control the game that you want to play. You can choose which game, which rules you're going to play it by. But generally people that are super consistent, super reliable, like great employees at Adobe who are phenomenal, they're not very good at taking risks because they've managed their entire life very much unlike me. I barely graduated from high school. I have failed massively at many things that I've tried to do. And so failure is a constant companion for me. I'm very comfortable with failure. I work with people that have never had a serious failure in their entire life. They are so fucking awesome. I mean, they're 9 times smarter than I will ever be. They have just like a dream life, checked every box, worked their ass off, and we're super smart and the Ivy League thing and anything. But at the end, when it comes time to, well, you want to bet it all and go for building something that really is awesome, that is really hard. And when they do take a risk and it starts to go wrong, I've seen them implode, right? Because they don't have any practice at fucking up, right? I have enormous experience at fucking up. I know how to do it so well, it almost doesn't look like fucking up. And that, to me, is, the entrepreneurial thing is, so if you're looking for perfect people, you're not going to find them.
So what are you looking for then?
You're looking for people that, anybody here play role-playing games? Like
Dungeons and Dragons?
Dungeons and Dragons, anything like that, Diablo, anything, World of Warcraft. So you roll a character in the game, right? You choose what class they're going to be, and you get a certain number of points. And you can assign those points, like X many into strength, and X many into intelligence, and X many into dexterity. So they could be really good at throwing knives or shooting a bow, have a lot of dexterity, or they could be really good at heaving an axe if they're, have a lot of strength, but you can't really have both. And so you have to balance. And one of the things you learn when you play our role-playing game, and you do enough of these characters, because a lot of people start out and they go, well, I'll put 10 into each of these, right? And they have a perfectly even low bar across. Those are great corporate employees, right? Startup people have all the points in one bar. So many that the other bars are below 0, right? So they tend to have extraordinary superpower in one area and be fundamentally broken people in other areas. And that's okay, because as long as you understand how they're broken, you can build a system that maximizes their incredible superpower while minimizing their kryptonite, whatever it is. And as a founder, that's what you need to understand. You need to find those people that other people, I've hired people that other companies fired, who became sensational people. But you have to build a different system, and you have to be like, Benoit can call me an asshole all day long, right? I love it because he delivered the code, right? So I can build a system where that guy can be successful and do what he does and have a blast. Whereas he would have trouble getting along in another company. One of my engineers, so when Adobe bought my company, there was an engineer who was based in Europe who was a contractor. We never actually hired him. Kind of weird guy, really tall, very German, lived kind of in a Bavarian forest somewhere near trees. Very strange kind of guy, wears all black all the time. Very pale, long hair, very weird kind of vampire thing going on all day, every day. And, but awesome, brilliant programmer, like one of the top people. So as a gift to Adobe, because they were really nice, I said, so this guy, I'll give you his number, call him up. He's one of the best people in the world. My guys think this guy walks on water. Like, that's how good he is. And my guys, the Adobe people, were like, we don't even understand them. Are they human? We've never seen developers that good. And my guys are saying, this guy is their god, right? And I said, so you should interview him. So later I followed up with that man to say, so how'd it go? He said, we flew him out from Europe, and we interviewed him, and the team didn't think he was a really good cultural fit with the team. They didn't think, first of all, he hadn't done any research on Adobe products. He hadn't done any sort of background on our team. And when he interviewed, he didn't seem to really care about fitting in any way. And so I just didn't think he would really go well with our team. And I looked at this guy and I'm like, so you just let one of the greatest programmers ever to walk the earth walk out of the fucking door? And I convinced him that if you guys offered him a job, he should come to Adobe. And he was interested. He actually did. So this guy has a standing job offer from John Carmack, the guy that wrote Quake, you know, like, from every top gaming company. He could walk in and name it. He won't take their money. He doesn't want to write a game there. And I convinced him that he should come to Adobe because he could have a platform to do something interesting, and you let him leave because you didn't think he was a good fit for you. It's like we could fire all of you and he could do everything that you're doing. We don't need a fit. He is the fit. We'll build a fit around him. It was like incomprehensible to me that they let him walk out the door. Because this was a big gift I was giving them, because I could keep this guy and leave Adobe and go to another startup for $1 billion around this guy, right? But I gave him for free to Adobe. Bring him, he'll work for you. I talked to him on the phone and convinced him to come and interview. And they let him walk out. And so what ended up happening, they flew him back again, interviewed him again, and hired him. And he works at Adobe and has done fucking miracles. And they love him and think he's awesome. But it was like, what are you thinking? But it's like I understood the mindset. Like at Adobe, they're like looking for like something different than we'd be looking for in a startup, which is just sheer raw skill, like ability. Like that's what we're looking for. They were looking for good corporate citizens. It's like, well, we do need those in finance, probably in HR, you know. Hey, big company, 40,000 people probably need a lot of that. But we are not going to be a company that changes the world without finding extraordinary.
So I'm actually, you know, looking at your background, I actually found it odd that you stayed at Adobe for so long. Because, you know,
Most people do.
My last startup, I was at a startup. It got acquired by Cisco, and the culture just died when Cisco acquired us. So I was actually kind of you know, actually just wow, you've been Adobe in a long time. So and actually, I think part of it, and I think you've done some pretty interesting things, like the video streaming thing that you did. I think you've done some interesting things there. And actually, just recently, Mark was actually in forums, and you've created a product called Kickbox. You want to talk a little bit about that, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah. So Kickbox is it's not really a product. It's a system that we use at Adobe for innovation internally. So I was doing projects at Adobe, and I was getting, you know, inquiries. So my boss at Adobe said, who reports to the CEO, said, so you are doing really weird stuff, and the way you're doing it is weird. You're moving incredibly fast, and it's almost scary how quick stuff is happening, and you're pivoting and dropping things that you thought was a good idea, and you know, quicker than they would have a meeting to talk about something, we already have experimented with it, dropped it, moved on. And so there was just a whole different pace and way of thinking about what we were doing, which is very much kind of what has become Lean Startup now, you know, what Eric and Steve Blank have pushed out. And so I kind of had my own sort of form of that before Eric's book had come out. There was a lot of information online, a lot of entrepreneurs talking about sort of these techniques. And so the request came from my boss, you know, could you teach other people at Adobe how to do that? And I said, oh, let me think about it. I don't know if I could do that. So I thought about it for a while. I went back to him and I said, I don't think so. I don't know how to teach other people how to do that. And being a really smart guy, he said, well, you know, just keep it in the back of your mind. Think about it. You know, if you come up with anything, you know, let's talk about it. And so over a few months, I did sort of ponder it and talk about it with other people and just bounce ideas around. And I realized that the model was wrong to think about teaching people stuff because it's so experiential, you have to do it. And so when I started thinking about the idea of internal innovators at Adobe being my customer, and I wanted to make a product that helped them be an innovator, that then sort of shifted everything mentally for me, where I could now understand, I know how to do that. I know how to build that product. And so I went back to my boss, say, yeah, I think I know how to do it. And he said, good, let's have a meeting to talk about it. But before he actually had time to have the meeting to talk about it, I had already deployed it. We had done an experiment around it where we ran 60 people through this. I created this red box in my garage, and it has 6 color-coded cards inside. It has a prepaid credit card with funding for you to do your idea, and has everything you really need. So it's kind of a desert island kit to be an innovator, because I went and talked to a lot of people who are trying to do innovation and asked them why they wanted to
You talk about
succeed.
what's in the kit? Or the proprietary? Like what's in the kit, like what are the 6 cards, or
You can go download it. We open sourced it all in February. And so thousands of companies have downloaded it and are using it now. It's consistent.
What's it called again?
It's called Kickbox. So you can go to kickbox.adobe.com and download it all for free. Put everything we know about it online, all the source materials. It's enough for you to print it and then deploy it entirely. In fact, 2 of the big 5 consulting firms are already deploying it to their clients without any help from us. I mean, they just downloaded everything. We've had people translate it into Korean and French and other languages and contribute it back. And so it's basically this system for, you follow, essentially there's 6 levels in the red box. And you starts with level 1, which is all about motivation, because you really have to align that first. And then there's a set of actions that you complete at the end of each level. And they're self-gating, so you do it yourself. You sort of check the boxes on the checklist, say, okay, I'm done with level 1, move on to level 2. Then you do level 2, check the boxes at the end, and you go all the way through until you get to level 6. And when you've checked off the boxes at the end of level 6, you have officially beaten the red box. And so there's a fabulous prize. If you've beaten the red box, we'll give you a blue box. And the blue box lets you take your product idea on to the next level. So the whole system runs itself. There's no hierarchy at Adobe that runs it. It's literally half an admin, and 20% of my time runs this entire innovation process that over 1,200 innovators have explored 1,200 ideas in a completely organic way with no big system. And so when I talk to companies like General Electric, they have they call it, we have 300 innovation coaches here helping other people. How many of those people we need to assign to Kickbox? It's half an admin. She orders pizza for the workshop. Kinko's makes the boxes and delivers them from the download. And so everything you need is in the box. And I'm worried if you're going to have that many people, well, we have a six months. We have a very difficult goal to deliver this in 6 months and deploy it in the corporation. And I have to tell them, so if I invented it in 3 weeks, including designing, publishing the cards, printing everything in color, getting the credit cards, getting them in about 3.5 weeks, you guys shouldn't need 6 months to deploy the thing, because you have it all already. You can modify it, but I think you're way overthinking it. It's pretty simple, and it's very self-gating. And so one of the biggest things for large organizations is actually let go. Yeah. And so I designed Kickbox so that it would run itself. I wouldn't have to run it. And I'm telling people that run large organizations that want their job to be running innovation for a large company, I'm like, no. The people in your company already want to innovate. You're stopping them. So what you need to do is get the fuck out of their way, right? If you want to, it's like the innovation already wants to happen, you're suppressing it, is my position. And there's nothing you can do to cause innovation to happen. It's just you trying to cause it to happen is probably making it stop. And so what you need to do is back away and give people the right resources and a process where they can go do what they already want to do. Because people say, well, how do we motivate people to innovate? I'm like, humans are born wanting to create things. That's the nature of being human. And so it's natural. And you can't pay people any amount of money to be an innovator. You can pay them and they'll pretend to innovate for a paycheck. And innovation may accidentally happen while they're pretending to innovate. But in reality, people innovate because they're inspired by something, they're passionate about something. And that thing is what's going to light them up. That customer, that problem, that opportunity, that curiosity for something that's driving them forward. All you can do is get in their way. So what you want to do is empower them, tell them you trust them, give them a limited amount of resources and a process where they can prove to themselves and then to you that they have the right idea, that they're on the right path. So it has to be evidence-based, it has to be working directly with customers. So now when somebody at Adobe says, hey, I have a crazy idea, it's not part of my normal job, but I saw this opportunity, we say, stop right there, don't tell us what it is. Because if you don't tell us, we can't tell you no. We don't know what it is, we can't discourage you. We'll just give you this red box. Go out and try your idea with customers as a mock-up, as a concept. And then, if you get a positive reaction from customers, bring it back. And that's the first time other Adobe employees should hear your idea, after you've already tried it with our customers. The company, we don't know, we're just guessing. We get all the software for free, by the way, so we're not even customers. And so, the only people's opinion that matters is actually customers out in the field. So I want our innovators going out and talking to them. And I want them, if it's a lousy idea, which many are, even I get very excited about it, it turned out to be a lousy idea, that a customer's just not interested in, I want them to hear it from the customer, not some executive trying to proxy for customers. First of all, we could be wrong. And say, customers aren't interested in that. We're just completely wrong. Turns out they're hugely interested in that. And so let's go get the real data so we can stop guessing. And that's what Kickbox does. It's an exercise in the distribution of power to the edges of the network and resources. Not a huge amount. They start with $1,000 on their credit card, but they don't have to do any receipts, any expense reports, nothing, which is radical in and of itself. In a large, if you work in a large corporation, you realize that's like inverting gravity. But there's no process for tracking the expenditure of that $1,000. And that was very important in the design of Kickbox because it lets people know tangibly, this is really important and we trust you because we're breaking our own rules. The rules every corporation has in order to enable you to do this. And so it must be important. So it's irrefutable evidence how important this is and how much we trust you. And the fact that Adobe got behind doing that is pretty cool. I mean, I won't say it wasn't contentious a little bit, but it was fairly smooth, particularly in the early days, because I didn't tell anybody what I was doing
like that.
until it was already successful. But then people really got behind it. I mean, it got a lot of support from people. There was a little bit of, finance had a few heartburn issues, legal. So you have people going out and trying ideas with customers the company doesn't even know about, much less having had a legal review. And I said, great, I got 1,000 innovators, so do you have 1,000 lawyers that can meet with them? Our legal department does not have 1,000 lawyers. So once you scale the problem big enough, all the systems break. And that's one of the breakthroughs of Kickbox is you can get the system to back away when you scale it so big that it would choke the system. So, okay, I got 1,000 ideas, who should I have them call for legal review? And the legal person. Okay, so maybe we could work with you, because I said, I just need a self-service way, like one sheet of paper with guidelines so that people could keep themselves out of the worst forms of trouble legally. Won't be perfect, but if the idea looks like it might go, and they're starting to scale above the quick experiment phase, then they can come back. After they get the blue box, then we can have legal look at it, right? But it goes up the ladder. But having legal look at stuff before we even know if it's a good idea is kind of stupid. We don't want to have huge legal problems or anything, so we don't want people collecting personally identifiable information, whatever, not treating it properly. So we have a few guidelines that are easy to understand.
Is the blue box go where they actually present it to upper management, or is that just the next
Yeah,
step?
so that's how you get, that's level 6. You have to basically have to infiltrate your idea back into the company. And so you take the data, everything you've done in the first 5 levels, and that takes you back into pitching it. So level 6, I call the boss levels. That's where you have to go back and pitch the bosses. And it is really interesting because when you're competing against ideas inside the company that are PowerPoint presentations backed by virtual spreadsheets with no real-world data and no actual customers, there are personas with stock photos that don't represent any real human, and they go up against somebody that just went out and actually talked to real customers and had them engage with their mock-up website, and they have real analytics data of people actually wanting to order the product. I mean, slam dunk. They get investment from the executives because it's reality. Like, normally they're just seeing theory, but now we're actually bringing real reality. And most of the projects fail, which this was designed to do. One of the first design goals of Kickbox was to increase our failure rate dramatically. We weren't failing nearly enough. Because if your failure rate isn't high enough, you're not trying things that are risky enough, right? So we were taking the even money, sure thing bets, right, and doing really well with those, but we weren't getting enough of the 100 to 1 huge return.
So are there any success stories you can talk about?
Yeah, there's several. So there's a site called knowhow.adobe.com, which is a marketplace for people to do to offer training videos to customers that are using Adobe products. So because we make these training materials, we can never make enough. We never make them in the right languages, and their products are always changing. And so we'd have to have all 14,000 people just making training materials because our products are so powerful and so many features. And so it's really just like a never-ending battle of our training and education group trying to make enough materials. It's like, well, this is stupid. Why don't we just, this innovator who's based in India said, why don't we just make a marketplace and let other people do it, and our customers can pay them, buy the stuff. We'll just get a cut for connecting them, helps them use our products better. And it's like everybody wins. Slam dunk. That was one of the early ones. We've had some other interesting things happen. One's called Project Breathe, which is actually a meditation and mindfulness program inside Adobe, which has been hugely successful inside the company. And so the innovator that came up with that actually called me up. I was on vacation, called me over the phone. And so I had this idea. I don't know if it really fits in Kickbox, but he came to the workshop, he got the box, he was doing it, and he says, but my idea is really this meditation thing. It's an internal program, not customer facing. So I told him, well, the tools I designed in Kickbox are really for customer facing things, right? It was designed for that. So I don't know if Kickbox is really a good fit for what you're trying to do. I think it sounds like a cool idea, but you should probably go to HR or somebody that has a budget aligned for that does internal facing programs, because some of Kickbox's tools will be useful to you to do an internal program, but not all of them. And he said, okay, well, so I remember the part where you said that we're CEO of our own idea and we already have the credit card and nobody can cancel our idea but us until we run out of the money. And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, thanks. And he hung up and he went and did it. So that was a case of a project I would have killed if Kickbox allowed me to kill it. But the system does not allow me to kill it. So I am not in control. A lot of people, think like, wow, Kickbox is really interesting. You approve all the products. Like, I don't even know what all the projects were. Know-How was a post-revenue product before I ever fucking heard of it. And I run the innovation program it came out of. Because they never called back. They said, call if you need help. Akshay did not apparently need any help. He went back to India and he fucking shipped the product, which is the perfect example of it working, right? Somebody said, well, that's a defect because you couldn't track your success. I said, no, that's an example of it working. I didn't even know about it, and it shipped. That's awesome. Totally great, because they're now self-empowered. They can do it. I don't have to be there. It's not me running it. We just have to give them the resources and get the hell out of the way.
So, I guess I was actually thinking about, why have you been at Adobe so long? It sounds like they're sort of giving you the freedom to experiment and try these different things. Startup.
Well, Adobe's a really interesting company, and it's gone through a lot of challenges and growth, which I think is one reason why it's still there. Because we've had big problems to solve, things to change. And it's a super well-run company, so there are interesting things to learn from it in terms of systems and process that I didn't know before. So I've learned a lot that's really valuable, I think, from looking at how people do it in a large, mature system like that. But, it hasn't been entirely peaceful and wonderful the whole time. I've been fired from Adobe. I've quit a couple times. And so, there's, as I like to what people say, like on Facebook, if you could put under your employment and just put it's complicated, that would probably be. But ultimately, it's been a really good and interesting relationship, but it hasn't been where it was all like, we've had severe disagreements before, but I think that's fine to do that. And so they've given me enough latitude, to do things both inside and outside Adobe. There have been times when I've come and said, I need to quit because I want to go do this, or I want to work with this other company in their lab, and what they're doing is really interesting. And I want to driverless cars and play with that for a while or something, and we're not going to do that at Adobe. And they're like, you could still do that in Workday. That every time they just like, we could figure out a way to do that. And if that's really what you want to do, that's fine. Take some time, go do that. And so it's been pretty awesome in that way in terms of I think they're very smart in that way. So that's one reason why they made it hard to leave, at least in the happy times. But I think you want to have some creative friction. Even in startups, you need to have creative friction between the founders. Like, if it's all wonderful and Ozzy and Harriet, you're probably not going to make a great product. Some of that, great partnerships, Roger and Hammerstein and, Siskel and Ebert, and they weren't always peaceful, wonderful relationships, right? There was that creative tension and differences between them that drove some of the great success. And so I don't think that employees could always be harmoniously aligned with everything about the company. I'm generally aligned. I think it's a good company. There are certain things that I would probably do differently. But I think that, in some cases I'm right. In some cases I've actually said, like, this is never going to work, and I was just wrong too. So that, and Adobe did it, ended up working great. I was like, oh, shit, I was wrong. So, that'll happen. But I think ultimately you always have to look back at, are you able to do the things you want to do? Because ultimately I want to have impact. So can I have the right impact at Adobe? And so the way that I view it, it's kind of insane probably, but somebody asked me shortly after the acquisition, so they were asking kind of this question about how long will you stay here and all of that. And my answer was, so one way to think about getting acquired, like Serious Magic, 35, 40 people getting acquired by Adobe, another way to think about that is Serious Magic acquired Adobe. But we had to give up 99.99999% of the equity in Serious Magic to acquire the assets of Adobe.
Wow.
But we got the sales force, the distribution, the brands, everything else for our products and our people. Is that a good acquisition? And I think it's a great way to think about, would you give up 99.99999% of your startup to acquire this big corporation? And then once you're inside the corporation, will you be able to bend it to your will to do things you find interesting? And I think that is the challenge in any large organization. But a lot of times one of the things that I hear from our internal innovators, well, my boss doesn't really want me to do this. So, is it what you really want to do? Then find a new boss, right? Find somebody that wants you to do that. We don't want you sitting here doing what you don't want to do, because guess what? You're not going to be good at it. You're going to probably suck at it. When I do things I don't want to do, I suck at it. And so we want you to do something that you really want to do, that you're good at, because you'll kick ass. You'll do something amazing. And so you should fire your boss and go get a new one, or quit Adobe if you can't find what you want to do here, because I don't need more drones inside the company doing what they're told. We have enough of those. I need people that are doing what they're excited about. They want to change the world, and they view Adobe, because a lot of people say, I work at Adobe and I do what it tells me to. That is not a very productive way for you to go to work in a big company. If you work in a big company, the thing you need to do is view the assets and resources of that large corporation as a tool you intend to use to do things that you want to have done. And so you need to find out if you can get alignment between you and the right pieces of the organization where you can get the right thing to happen. And so as long as you're solving problems that you find interesting and you have that alignment, then, so for me, Adobe is like this huge toy box. There isn't really, it's hard to imagine a better, bigger toy box. It's like being the one kid on the block that has like the toy box with all the masters of the universe in it and all the Barbies in it, right? It's like we have all these technologies, brands, distribution channels, markets, and so it's an amazing toy box to do really interesting things that you can put together. The challenge is getting the organizational alignment to make that happen, to make the business case to make it happen, which is challenging. And that's the, challenge is what you need to stick into a job, and it's very challenging. But when it works, it's awesome. When we can pursue a new vision and it ends up in an $800 million acquisition that started in the back of my mind as an idea, that is cool, right? That's a scope and a stage that you can work on. It's very hard to do in a small startup. At the same time, the disadvantage is, small startup can turn on a dime. The dime is all the money that startup has to turn on, but you can turn on a dime, and everybody is immediately aligned. You don't need to have a meeting about anything. A large company, we have the resources, but building that alignment and allocating those resources is a challenge.
So I'm going to open up for questions for Mark. Anybody? Go ahead.
How do you determine what your minimum viable product is? Like, so you have this great idea, it's proven maybe through Kickbox. When is it ready to actually give to people?
That is a really excellent question. So, and I can't give you a concrete answer because it depends a lot on the product and also on the business environment. So there's the idealized situation of what would be perfect, and that never happens in a startup. And so then you have what I have to do before my burn rate runs out, or before my investors balk, or before my distributor quits. It's like all of those things will actually determine your actions many times more than what would be ideal. But in a perfect world, I think the thing that you want to do is, I worry, I guess, fundamentally about, I love the idea of the minimum viable product as a concept, but we also have to have this other concept that I think is valuable, which I call the MAP, the minimum awesome product. So some people, I think, use a minimum viable product as an excuse to ship something that actually is uninteresting. The uninteresting product is the failed product. Nobody finds it it's so minimum that it doesn't do anything. So a minimum viable product still has to do at least one thing that is amazing to a customer, that solves a painful problem for that customer, and does it better than anything else, better than they could have imagined it was done. It has to be 10 times better than anything else. It could be only at that one thing. And people could bitch about the other 9 things that it obviously should do related to the one awesome thing, but the only reason they get pissed about that one awesome thing and the other 9 aren't there is because the one is so awesome. A lot of products ship and they're minimum viable product and no one cares. And so one of the things that I look at sometimes at Adobe's teams will do a new product, and I look at it and it's like it checks all the boxes, right? It has all the right save and load thing, it's accessible to people with disabilities, it has all of the right things all the way through it. It just doesn't do anything interesting. It's like you've done all the compulsories, but what does it do that is amazing, that has never been done before, that makes it extraordinary? Because right now you just checked all the boxes, so all the basic features that everybody who's already shipping does. And then I asked, so why is this going to be interesting to a customer? It's like, well, because this one's from Adobe. No one cares, right? It's like, it has to do something amazing. So, my sort of crazy example to try to make the point is, I tell them, I would rather have a product that crashes on save. So what that means is you've done a project, and now you're going to save it, and it crashes. We call that lost user work, right? So it crashes without saving. So everything they just did was destroyed by the software's bug. I would rather have it do that and do one thing in an extraordinary way than have everything nicely tested and all the basic features and menus complete in the product, all the boxes checked and nothing interesting. It's like, no, do one awesome thing. You'd be broken in every other way. But you do that one awesome thing, people will beat down our door going, God damn it, you assholes, it crashed! And it was great! I loved what I made! Right? That's okay. Let's give them their money back, right? And say, we're sorry it crashed. We go fix the crash bug. But we've built something that they are desperate. They come with torches and pitchforks, outside our office because they're desperate for us to fix it so they can use it because it's that awesome. And the problem is, a lot of people, completeness, there are no bugs. It's like, okay, there are also no interesting features. So that's my big concern is, think about, is this awesome enough? Minimum viable product is not an excuse to ship something that doesn't have, you're ready to test the one awesome thing that's really awesome. Steve's used some of my products before, and occasionally early on, they would ship and they did really awesome things until they didn't. And Steve would show up at our office with his computer. God damn it, this thing doesn't work. Okay, we'll fix it. And then we fixed it, and everybody was happy, right? But it was like, it did something interesting enough that he drove to our office with his computer. That is what you need. You need a customer that will drive to your office with a computer to make it work. Any question back there?
Thank you for being here. It's just amazing that you're here. That was dumb. But anyway, I started a company to help families buy homes, and it just seems like the innovation that I have, it just seems like there are other companies that are starting to come out with it, because maybe I'm taking like a long time to like, I mean, I'm actually doing like my business. I actually have 150 customers. The business is, it's a club for first-time home buyers, because like they need more time to connect to the resources and everything. And so, but it just seems frustrating, because it's like, as I'm doing my research and I'm actually doing my business, there's all these new technology products that are coming out that do the same thing that like I thought of. And so they would probably, of course, they would make my product better. I don't even have a real product, actually. It's just like a, well, it is a product, okay. So anyway, the point is that it's like, what do you do when there's so much innovation out there? It's in real estate, and yet all you're trying to do is help families buy homes, and then technology just keeps, like I said, developing and expanding, and I don't, you know what I mean? Like,
So
I know
fundamentally,
it's a crazy question, but
so whatever it is that you're going to do, no matter what product you guys are doing, somebody's already done it. It's already been done. No matter what it is, it's already been done. Always. You will find something, may not be exactly the same. You will find other things, usually happening at the same time, because you notice them because you're now working in the space. And if you go back and look in the Wayback Machine online, you'll find products that already tried to do it and failed in the past. Doesn't matter. Guess what? Google was not the first search engine. Alta Vista. It's awesome. Awesome product. There were lots of others as well. And so the thing is that you have to, it's part of timing, but you have to solve the customer's problem. And there'll be a lot of people trying to do things. And it's interesting because, you know, I used to do this as a young entrepreneur. You know, I'd have this great idea. I'd be so excited about it, be thinking about it. And I'd almost go and like do the research to find out what's in the market, almost like not wanting to know.
Right.
I know somebody's already doing this. It's so bad. And now, having been through the experiences I've been through, I had the complete opposite reaction. I'll have this great idea, and I go out desperately seeking, trying to find at least a dozen other people who have tried to do this idea. Because if I can't find at least 12, I'm going to kill it, no matter how great I think it is, because it means there's no market. Right? So if there aren't at least 12 people that have already tried to do something kind of in this area, solve this problem, maybe the solution's a little different, but they're after the same problem or customer, then that's a pretty good sign that there may not be a market there. I won't say it's absolute, you have to go and look at it, but it's probably a pretty good sign that there's a reason that there isn't a solution there. Because there are no customers. That's why, because solutions tend to hover around customers like lions around the watering hole, you know. And so if you can't find any lions at the watering hole, it might be poison, right? And so that's why you want to find competition. I don't want to go into any market where there is not competition. I remember being as a young entrepreneur going and telling investors, like, there's no competition for what we're doing. Like, that was a good thing. Now when people say that there's no competition, I'm like, shh. You don't want to say that. You want to come in and say, there's a shitload of competition, there's a ton of customers, lots of people competing for them, and let me tell you how I'm going to win.
wow.
If that, to me, is like, there's a market, there's people looking for my solution. The biggest problem, so I always ask, is this a real problem? Does the customer know they have a problem? Because there are problems that customers don't know they have, like ring around the collar, it's an invented problem to sell the detergent to people. Nobody actually had that problem before they did the commercials. So then it's like, is it a painful problem? How painful is it? Is it an aspirin level problem? Is it like a Vicodin level problem? You know, is it a morphine level problem? I like morphine level problems. I want customers in, you know, that need a solution. And then, are those customers reachable? Are they aggregated someplace that I can get to them? Because there are groups of customers that have the first three that aren't together. And so if they're all together, and home buyers, there's lots of ways we can reach them. That's a good thing, because I've had solutions before. It was a great solution that solved a painful problem for a real customer that knew they had the problem. But reaching everyone cost 120% of what we would make with the product because it was so expensive. And so they weren't aggregated. So you have to find that channel. They have to be reachable at an effective cost. And if you can align those four things, then you can build a successful business out of that. And generally, when those four things are aligned, there are always competitors already there. That's one of the things that let you know that they're there.
Thank you so much.
Mark,
Amazing.
one of the products that Adobe has is Adobe Captivate, and one of the challenges that we have in education is the ADA requirements associated with it.
What is the problem? I didn't hear you.
One of the requirements we have in education is the American
Captivate.
Disabilities Act.
Right.
Sorry, I use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And you were talking about your products, the Adobe products, and in large part, ones that I worked with are extremely challenging. And so the Captivate product, for example, the instructional aids that were provided by Adobe, I take it that the primary development team for that product, the developers are all from India.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And so the instructional videos, rather than typing out the instructions and maybe using Captivate to provide a computer voice, watching the instructional videos, I couldn't understand what people were saying. So you might carry back to Adobe that if they're going to do
Can you
instructional...
email me a link to the videos? That
Yeah,
helps.
yeah.
Because I can send it.
I don't understand people from India sometimes when they're talking, and they probably don't understand me. I'm not saying their English is any better or worse than mine. It's just a communications challenge. And when you have a product that has computer voices that speak English, yeah.
Send me a link,
Okay.
and I can get it to the right people.
Sheila?
I just noticed one of your tweets that you were at the Louvre recently and you were in front of 1,200 European business people. I'm just curious how that went and kind of questions did they ask?
So it was a really interesting conference called Unexpected Sources of Inspiration. It's kind of like TED for France. They hold it at the Louvre, and it was a great audience. They did questions, but only a couple via like Twitter, and it shows up on the screen, and they pick one or something. And I don't recall them being, I think the video's online now, I don't recall them being super interesting questions. They didn't stand out to me. I was talking a lot about Kickbox because these are generally executives in large corporations, not startup people. And they want to hear sort of like, how can we make our large corporation more like a startup? And this is especially challenging in Europe, where they don't, you know, the same startup culture is kind of a little bit behind. It's 10 years behind where it is here. Because financing and all the other things for venture startups is much harder to get in Europe, and people being able to take large business risk there is much more difficult. Although there are hubs now, Berlin, Amsterdam, and other places where you're seeing a lot of activity happen and a lot of excitement. But that community is just emerging. And so they're really interested to hear, like, how do we do this? And so Kickbox was, you know, fascinating for them as a process that they could deploy inside their organization that would help them do it. And, you know, the big message I have to give them is fundamentally, how do you, you know, just deploying Kickbox isn't going to be successful without letting go, right? You have to let go. So I've had large organizations call up and you know, insist on talking to me because they're big Adobe customers or something, and they're like, okay, so we're going to deploy Kickbox. We love it. It's great. I'm like, good. Go ahead. Why do you need to talk to me? You know, it's like everything I know about it I wrote online. But they want, you know, confirmation. And they said, so we love everything about Kickbox except we can't just let people do any idea without knowing what it is.
Oh, jeez.
And we can't just give people $1,000. They have to turn in receipts and expense reports and get, you know, pre-approval. And we can't just give the box to anyone in the corporation that wants it. It needs to be product development people or
Oh my
engineers
God.
only. We can't just give it so that admins or the janitor or whoever could get it like you guys do. And I said, oh, okay.
Besides
well,
that.
right.
Besides that.
Besides that, we love Kickbox. I'm like, well, that is Kickbox. Those three things are, otherwise you just have a red box with pretty colored cards that don't mean anything. And so, I'm trying to convey, like, that is it. And so without it, it's not Kickbox. And so I think that's one of my concerns is the more different culturally, I'm not saying cultural from the US to Europe, but culturally in corporations that maybe are really large, that have these systemic challenges of adapting to new ideas that are grassroots instead of top-down management. My concern is that they take something like Kickbox as like a panacea, that, oh yeah, we just take this pill and it'll work. It's like, well, no. You're going to need to change your lifestyle and go on a diet and act differently, not just take the pill, right? It's like, the pill alone is not going to make you better. And that is, probably my experience with European. I had a really good time there, and I thought that they were pretty interesting in terms of some of the interviews that I did with the media there around that. They had.
You said they're online?
Yeah, and so I thought that they had this sort of like, what message from the startup world can you bring to European corporations, that how they could essentially save themselves, from being disrupted by, and so it's great that they've gotten the memo and that they need to change, and they're looking for ways to do that. And I just, the challenge is to say, there are no quick fixes to this.
We have one last question.
And you have done your research to do a startup. Do you still go find co-founders to bounce your ideas or invest and all this stuff, or do you do by yourself?
So a lot of investors like to see startups with two co-founders at least, instead of just one. But I think it can work with just one. There's no fundamental reason why not. I think the value of having two is that sort of creative friction, that you will be different, you'll have different perspective. There's also kind of the reality check of the other person being your co-founder saying, yeah, a lot of times you're right, but this time you're wrong. It's like you have that sort of check and balance going on. But I wouldn't go get a co-founder just for that. Generally, you get a co-founder because you need the skill. They can do something that you need to have done. They're like, and you need each other. Like there's, the typical model of the engineer and the marketing business person, get together, and this person raises the money and this person builds the product, and they, and it wouldn't go without both of them. So you're recruiting people because you desperately need them, and you need great people to be the first people, because those great people will help you attract more great people. It's amazing how that happens. Which is why you have to have extraordinary people at the beginning, because good people want to work with other good people. And so that, if you say, how do I recruit great people? It's like, start with great people. Even if it's just one, and have them be awesome. And then when people come and interview, have them spend time with your great person, and they'll want to work with them. And so that's my advice on that. I think co-founder can be valuable, but why would you give up a huge hunk of equity if you actually need what they want to? I mean, you can get lots of good business advice from investors and other people you could bounce ideas off of and things like that. Get a founder that can do valuable things that you desperately need done.
All right. Final question. What's your favorite superhero?
Oh, that's a really hard one. Because there are so many good choices. My favorite superhero, I'm partial to Ant-Man right now. Just because
I like the movie.
Yeah, so unlikely. An unlikely superhero.
I'd like to introduce you to a new superhero, Samurai Randall. We actually made a video game for you. Thank you for coming out to us and supporting our community.
Can we see?
Thanks.
So it's available on Android.
Oh.
It's available on Android. You can play me.
And,